Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got some really great content to cover today. I'm Kelly Kravitz, the Director of Highly Mobile and At-Risk Student Programs at TEA, and we have the privilege of being responsible for human trafficking prevention and awareness, as well as child abuse and neglect reporting. And I'm really grateful for today's presentation, where we have some other TEA colleagues who are joining, specifically David Rodriguez.
You know how to put the volume on
Please
this?
go ahead and mute yourselves, everybody. And maybe Rod, if we could go ahead and mute everybody. Okay, so today's presentation, we're going to be having David Rodriguez, as well as Deborah Owens and Tina Farrell joining from our Educator Investigations Division. And so they're going to be specifically sharing today about reporting and mandatory reporting with child abuse and investigating educator misconduct specifically. So we have recently, David reached out, and I'm so glad that he did, because we want to make sure that you all are aware of what the requirements and expectations are concerning reporting and investigating of educator misconduct.
Anyway, so
can we go ahead and mute everybody?
that's a great question though. How do you broach that?
Right.
And are you just frank about it? Are you just, hey,
Hey, Leslie, we can hear you talking. Please mute yourself.
on your phone, right? I'm seeing these.
Okay,
I was able to mute her, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And so just as a reminder, this is a part of our broader work that we're doing on human trafficking prevention awareness. And this webinar series is brought to you as a collaborative effort with the Title IV Region 14 a School Safety Initiative, the Office of the Governor, Region 12, the Texas School Safety Center, DFPS, as well as a number of other stakeholders, external, and then numerous divisions within TEA. And the point of this is to increase your awareness about human trafficking and the different resources that are available, child abuse and neglect reporting as well. We will be getting into that, but really want to equip and empower you and just to create more general awareness and understanding of the requirements that you have as school leaders in this important area. As far as our series, we started out this year of January with Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and we were able to have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who did a phenomenal presentation on internet safety. We also ended the month with the governor's office talking about trauma and trauma-informed approaches with students, and we had a panel presentation. In the month of February, we had Crime Stoppers of Houston share about their resources. All of this information is available on our Highly Mobile and At-Risk Student Programs Division webpage, where I would really encourage you to go back and listen to our webinar series, which dates back to the start of this year. Coming up this month, and I realize that our save the date here, there are a few things on it that have changed, so I just wanted to let you guys know. Next month will be an ESC only meeting, and we will be taking a deeper dive into the asset mapping. We will then, in the month of May, be having the Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas, who will be sharing more about who they are, the work that they do. And then we will end this webinar series for this year with reminders and resources as you plan for the upcoming school year, as we kind of highlight all that we've learned and worked on. That'll be just a power-packed information with a lot of resources and information for you. Please go ahead and go to the next slide. And please, everybody, keep yourselves on mute and then go ahead and drop the name, your name and your organization in the chat, because we want to make sure that we know who's with us today. And again, thank you for this time. I'm now going to turn it over to David, who will take you through the rest of the presentation.
Great, thanks so much, Kelly. Thanks so much for having us this morning. We have several objectives for you today and for us to kind of convey. One, we want to talk a little bit about our division responsibilities. show you some information that we received or that we have gathered recently and some data about reporting that really causes a need for increased awareness over and above beyond what we are, the existing need. And then talk a little bit about what school responsibilities are, the responsibilities of both districts and the administrators in terms of reporting misconduct. And then also try to tie what we do in terms of investigating misconduct into some of the other information that we've received through these web series about human trafficking, specifically around the behaviors and warning signs. There'll be a little bit of other information as we go through, and you'll hear from a couple of our investigators who will give you some examples of cases they've worked on and how that's relevant to the information we're providing today. We have two investigators with us. Tina Farrell, she is an investigator within the Educator Investigations Division. She's spent 20 years in the career of criminal justice and investigations, and she's worked for a number of agencies, including TJJD, Juvenile Justice Department, Department of Insurance, and CPS. She's been with TEA for about 3 years now, and she's licensed as a certified fraud examiner and also a licensed peace officer. We also have Deborah Owen with us as well. Deb has been around child advocacy investigations and efforts for the last 30 years. I've worked with Deb for the last 10 years or so, and I know her just to be dedicated to child safety and the well-being of children and Texas students. My name is David Rodriguez. I've been here at the agency for about 10 years, in this role as director for 2 now, and have enjoyed reaching out and working with a number of you over the years, and look forward to feedback you might have about the information we're giving today. I want to start out a little bit by talking about the objective and responsibilities of our division. We aim to basically meet one objective when it comes down to it, and that is protecting the welfare of Texas students. We do so by carrying out the responsibilities in terms of investigating allegations of misconduct against certified educators certified by the State Board for Educator Certification. And also more recently, we have the responsibility for investigating non-certified employees and educators that are in schools. We are phased out into several different units within our division. We have an intake and review unit. We have an investigation unit, and those work hand in hand to initially open up the reports and do a preliminary review of the information, and then later on investigate allegations of misconduct as they come in. We also have a staff dedicated to our applications that are required for some of the required reporting, such as our misconduct reporting portal, our fingerprinting applications, and our do not hire registry. And then we also have staff dedicated to managing our records, and then finally to supporting schools and providing technical support each and every day when districts and other parties have questions about how to use our applications. And this slide kind of outlines some of that same information. I'm going to pause real quick because it looks like my connection might be unstable. Okay. Again, we receive a high volume of reports into the agency, and that's through, and you're going to hear a little bit about the type of reports we receive. But it is important that we dedicate a good portion of our work to vet these reports, whether it's criminal history, reports from school districts, anything else. We look at those and determine if an investigation is warranted. Our investigators can open up administrative investigations against certified and non-certified educators. They have the ability to settle matters informally and potentially make recommendations about sanctions of those educators based on our board rules, based on commissioner rule. The other thing that we do, again, is provide customer support to schools, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail how to do that. And again, there's several very large IT applications in our work stream, and we will talk a little bit more about how those work and how both schools and agency staff use those to make sure that the requirements are met. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tina Farrell at this point.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. I'm going to be talking about the investigation process. Next slide. So this is just an overview of the investigation and litigation process. When we receive reports, it comes in through our intake unit. The intake unit will then vet to see whether there's an investigation. Then we conduct our investigations. Depending on the outcome, if we don't settle, we will forward it to legal. Legal at that time will go ahead and forward it to the Office of Administrative Hearings. And from there, depending on if they're certified, they will go to the State Board of, State Board for Educator Certification, SBEC, for their final decision. Now, if they are non-certified, then the TEA commissioner has that authority to make that final decision for that non-certified educator. So I'll talk to you about, and as David mentioned, how we get our investigations. Well, we get our investigations through a few different avenues. The first one is the superintendent reports, the 249s, criminal history hits, CPS reports, NASDAQ from other states, and complaints from the public. Once we receive those reports, then they will go into our intake and review unit. That unit will review the preliminary facts and determine whether there needs to be an investigation. If there does not need to be an investigation, they will go ahead and review it, close it, and record it for future. If it does need an investigation, then that information will be passed along to the manager, who will then assign that case to an investigator. Once that investigator receives that case, they will add a warning to the virtual certificate stating that they are being investigated by TEA. Then the investigator will send a letter to the educator certified in first class, letting them know that there has been a warning placed on their certificate. And that is called a show cause letter. If the educator decides to respond to that show cause letter and does have show cause, rare occasions we will remove that warning. But if the educator does not respond to our show cause letter, then the investigation begins. We get more in detail with it. We will collaborate with the schools and other agencies outside of the school, law enforcement, CPS, the courts, and whoever we need to gather that information. We'll send out subpoenas certified to get certain information that we need to be protected. And Debbie will go a little more into that. We will contact victims and witnesses, interview them, get more information on what we need, and then we would just gather everything that we need for this investigation. After we've done that, we proceed to, and just briefly, if a case is pending in a criminal court, it will be placed in a suspense matter pending the outcome. And again, Debbie will speak more on that. But if the investigation is moving forward and we're ready, we will conduct what we call an informal conference with the educator. This is where the educator has their time to tell us their side of the story. I know we'll ask questions back and forth. We'll have a good dialect because they've been accused or they have an allegation against them. And we want them to explain to us their side because everyone is conducting their own individual investigation and we are doing ours, so that we need more information from them. So once we've conducted our conference with the educator, then we move to the next step. We look at all the findings that we have against the educator. Do we have anything to substantiate those findings? If we don't, then we will go ahead and remove the warning and administratively close that case. But if we do have it and we can't substantiate it, then the investigators like myself will make a recommendation to settle, make a settlement offer to the educator. And then they have the option to either accept our offer, and if they do, then we will go ahead and add that to the virtual certificate, or if the sanction requires them to surrender or revocation, then they will be placed on the registry. But if they do not accept our offer, then we will refer it to our legal department for formal litigation. And then that goes again into what the previous slide said. It'll go in that direction. But this is for certified educators.
Thanks, Tina. I want to talk a little bit about the types of cases that we investigate and then look at some of the case trends. We investigate a wide range of conduct. This is based on the code of ethics and the misconduct that is listed in board rule, the administrative code. We investigate, our primary allegations that we look at are those that directly impact students, certainly those that directly impact students' safety and welfare, such as anything around sexual misconduct, violence in the classroom, inappropriate relationships with students. We also investigate allegations around fraud, theft, drug and alcohol use, both on and off campus. And then we investigate felony behavior in itself. So any type of felony conduct, we will open up investigations to determine whether or not sanctions are warranted. If you look at the slide in front of you, you'll see the trend that cases have been on the rise for a number of years now. This has primarily been because of increased requirements for reporting over the years, starting back in 2013, really, in 2015, superintendents were required to report certain allegations of misconduct. And there has been obviously an increased awareness around misconduct in districts, and you see in the news articles about inappropriate relationships, child abuse. And so reports have come in at a higher rate, and cases have also been opened. In 2020, we did actually receive fewer cases, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about that, fewer reports in the area of certified educators, but replaced those with our new authority and responsibility to investigate non-certified educators. 2021 is faring about the same. It seems to have plateaued, and I'm gonna address that here in the next slide. So what I wanted to do was to kind of bring to your attention in my mind, a big red flag about a reporting that is coming to us at the state level. Since for the last several years, we've seen an uptick in the number of reports coming in from school districts. These are mandatory reports coming in from superintendents, school districts. However, in 2021, for the last 6 or 7 months, we have actually seen a 58% decrease in reports around inappropriate relationships and violence in the classroom. Now, that's not to say that our numbers have necessarily gone down, because we've also opened a very high number of cases around felonies and criminal activity in itself that might warrant sanctions on somebody's certificate. But today I really want to talk about what happens and maybe some of the causes for a decline in inappropriate relationships and violence in classroom reporting. What we believe is not necessarily that superintendents or schools are withholding any of that information, but rather that maybe these allegations aren't surfacing from the onset, that students and parents and friends aren't going to trusted advisors, to schools, maybe counselors or teachers that they normally would, and report suspicions that they might have. Obviously, there's going to be limitations around a remote environment, and it's not as easy to find a teacher after class or during lunch and talk about some of the concerns you have. So we want to just let everybody know that we need to remain vigilant and even push forward even further on our efforts to identify and signs of inappropriate relationships. And I'm going to hand that over to Deb now to talk about 2 different types of investigations.
Hi, I'm going to talk a little bit about comparing criminal to administrative investigations, and beginning with the burden of proof. The burden of proof is different in criminal cases and our administrative cases. In criminal cases, typically beyond a reasonable doubt. In our administrative cases, it is a preponderance of the evidence when the burden of proof is met at greater than 50%. So talking a little bit about when an educator is arrested, we will receive notice from DPS advising us of that. We have intake staff that review these arrests and refer them to investigations. We open all felonies. Some misdemeanor arrests may not be opened. For an example, the first time DWIs. When we receive a criminal history case, the investigation department will open that. We'll send out the responsive documents. The arresting agency will be contacted to obtain case information. We want to know the detective that's assigned to that case, the case number, also the case status, if it's still with them, if it's been referred to the DA. We have a suspense team in our office that monitors those cases through that process to disposition. So we want to see what happens with that arrest, and the time is told during that time frame so that we can await that information for the outcome of that arrest. Once the case is disposed, it'll be disposed in either a court order. Sometimes the cases are disposed of with a rejection. They did not prosecute the case. It can be dismissed. It can be no-billed by a grand jury. And that does not mean that a sanction is not warranted on a case. Sometimes people think if nothing happened in the criminal case, then nothing's going to happen in the administrative case. And we do look at the conduct that led to that arrest. So just because you didn't get a criminal finding or disposition doesn't mean you would not get a sanction on a certificate. Once we get that result, the educator is given another opportunity in which to give their side of the story, let us know what happened. The case will be staffed with a supervisor, and a recommendation will be made to resolve that case informally through our investigations area. If the educator accepts that offer, whatever it is, whatever type of sanction, then we close out at our investigation level. If for some reason they reject what the offer is, it will go down to our legal department and they will pursue it for formal proceedings at that time. Sometimes we've had cases where educators have actually had sexual relationships with students, and it's gone to a grand jury and the grand jury just no-billed the case. Sometimes we're finding that they're doing that in cases where a student might be 17, the student is older and says that it was a consensual relationship. Some of these grand juries appear to feel if this wasn't an educator, he would not have or she would not have a criminal history. So they pretty much no-bill that case. But we will continue to pick that up. Obviously, that's a sanction that we would view as a surrender permanently and put on that do not hire list for anybody having a relationship with a student. And that's that in a nutshell.
Thanks, Deb. I'm going to talk briefly about the responsibilities for administrators in schools. Many of you may have seen some of our presentations over the year about different responsibilities, and we've kind of shrunk that down a little bit here just to give you one look at it. But we also have opportunities through other presentations to kind of do a deep dive into each of these sections. But I really want to focus today on Chapter 21 and Chapter 22 requirements. Those are of the Education Code. As you know, there's a lot of requirements also in Chapter 38. I'll briefly touch on those as well. But 21 and 22 is really what we deal with in educator investigations, and that's what we can speak to this morning. There are 4 buckets of requirements. They are the requirement to fingerprint employees, the requirement to search the do not hire registry before hiring, the requirement to investigate certain allegations of misconduct, really, and then also to report that information to TEA in certain circumstances. Just quickly, the fingerprinting process has been on the books for a little over 12 or 13 years now. Our system, we let you know whether an individual has been fingerprinted, and then we go ahead and we initiate the fingerprinting process through our vendor, through DPS, through the FBI, if they have not been fingerprinted. We vet that information. The school is allowed to vet the information, those results of the fingerprint, and we take necessary actions from there. And the do not hire registry was a requirement that was put in place through HB 3 of the 86th legislature 2 years ago. The bottom line is school districts have to check the registry before they hire anyone. And if someone is on the registry, they may not be hired in any capacity within the school district. We have investigations processes where we place people on the registry. Tina is going to talk to you about that in just a few moments. But it's important to know that non-compliance of this does carry penalties for charter schools, for district innovations. and it's necessary to obviously remain in compliance for your district. In terms of investigating misconduct, this is also a requirement that has been out there for a while, but one of the key takeaways is that school districts are required to investigate allegations of misconduct despite resignation. So if you bring an allegation to an educator and they say, you know what, I don't want to talk further about this, and I turn in my resignation notice, if that's an allegation of inappropriate relationships or child abuse, you have to continue on with that investigation despite them walking out the door that day. And that is so that we can have, and you can have the necessary information to on record for that person, and then the state may conduct a subsequent investigation. And then school superintendents are required to report the allegations of inappropriate relationships and child abuse for any employee after they've resigned or separated from the district. But for certified educators, there's other categories, and I'll talk about those in a few moments. I'll hand it back off to Tina.
So what is the do not hire registry? Well, it's an online list of individuals who are not eligible for employment in the Texas public schools based on their misconduct or criminal history. And this list can be accessed by schools through the TL account or by the public through the TEA website. So who must TEA place on our registry? Well, individuals who've had their SPEC certificate revoked for findings of abuse of a student or minor, or that they were involved in a romantic relationship or solicited or engaged in sexual conduct with a student or minor. Now, this will also apply for non-certified employees now, who have also had findings of abuse of a student or minor, or were involved in a romantic relationship, again, solicited, engaged in sexual contact with that minor. And then our third group of people are individuals who were placed on the sex offender registry after receiving a deferred adjudication or being convicted, or a conviction of a Title V offense where the victim is under 18 years of age. And then there's certain criteria for charter school employees. They have to ask themselves if they were a certified educator, would we sanction them?
Thanks, Tina. I'm going to hand it over to Deb to talk a little bit about the requirement of school investigations, required school investigations.
All right, I'm going to talk a minute about insights and the relevance of prior conduct and reprimands. We want to know that because it shows a pattern of behavior of this educator. We want to know if the educator had received any type of verbal warnings, if they've received any kind of constructive criticism in which it relates to their conduct and students. For example, if they've been talked to because they've had students in their class before school, after school, during lunch, they're showing favoritism to certain students and they've had that brought to their attention. We want to know that history because this may show a pattern of grooming, and that we want to be aware of that when we're reviewing an educator for sanctions on their certificate. When we do subpoenas, we're asking the school district to send us all of the information in regard to that educator, including everything involving that allegation if they've sent it to us. We want to know in that subpoena about these past relevant prior conduct and reprimands, even if they're verbal, because they may be given just a verbal conversation about it and it may be documented at a campus level. And we want to make sure when these subpoenas are sent out that they're also checking the campus level for those types of documentation. This protects districts also regarding FERPA and gives us the information that we need to include all statements, reports, audio, videos, pictures, those types of things, so that we have that for our case as well. And so it's basically a global investigation of the teacher. It's not just specific to one incident. We want to see if there's any patterns so that we can determine an appropriate sanction.
Thank you, Deb. And I'll just pause there for a second. You know, we actually have a larger presentation about best practices for school investigations. Our investigators have kind of joined in the effort to kind of give feedback to districts about different things around the types of investigations and anything from reviewing procedures to how to approach certain parties of the investigations to gather in evidence. So we're not going to go into that today, but we did just want to give a few insights that we've seen regarding some feedback we wanted to get to you regarding how the types of conduct and reprimands that you should be looking at in addition to your normal investigation. Happy to answer any questions too later on. I want to go into a little bit about the reporting requirements. This is a slide that is pretty standard for our presentations. It is important to know that there are penalties that are follow failure to report against superintendents and principals. Bottom line is whether you're certified or whether an educator is certified or non-certified, there's an allegation of abuse or inappropriate relationships. That misconduct needs to be reported to the agency within 7 days of a person being terminated or resigned. For certified educators, also there's evidence of allegations that an individual distributing illegal drugs, controlled substance, misappropriation of funds, a certificate fraud, and also any crime on a school campus or property, any sponsored event, any transportation that is sponsored by the school district, any sort of violation there needs to be reported to us. It's important to know that the law has now stated that there just has to be evidence of these allegations. That they don't have to be the cause for termination or separation. So if there's any evidence, that needs to be reported to us. Again, the 7-day requirement applies to both principals and superintendents. Principals need to roll up that information and send it through their local process to ensure that the superintendent receives it within 7 days of the person being separated from the district. And then once the superintendent learns of that, they also have the 7 days to get that information to us. So the best way to report that from the school district standpoint is, in our opinion, to use the misconduct reporting portal. This was launched last March, a year ago, per the requirements of HB3. It is an electronic portal through TEAL. It is no cost to the district. The only cost associated is the time it takes to gather the information and to upload it through the portal. It allows us to kind of begin our process immediately. We get that information right away versus, of course, mail or fax or anything like that. Districts also get a confirmation of the submission, and the application keeps a record of all of the submissions. So if you need to prove later on that something was submitted to us, you can look in your logs and your records to do so. And then finally, just to go back and circle back around, these are the requirements in Chapter 21 and 22, and to tie into some of the other content you've heard about earlier on in this web series in prior weeks. There are requirements under Chapter 38 under child abuse reporting and programs that schools must have, policies addressing sexual abuse. There has to be training and prevention, and of course, posters, which are available on the TEA website. The one in front of you says, "Say no, go to a safe place and tell a trusted adult to speak to potential victims of abuse." Going to hand it over to Tina as we start to tie in some of the work we do to some of the other information you received earlier on.
Thank you, David. I'm going to talk about the potential intersections of misconduct investigations and anti-human trafficking efforts. So we both have a common objective. Not only does educator investigations have it when we're investigating our misconduct, but we also kind of notice that we also have the same objectives as the anti-human trafficking efforts. We both need to recognize the warning signs of the threat. We both have to, properly report and investigate each of the items that come in. We need to prevent, and this is a big thing, we need to prevent predators from gaining access to students or minors, and we need to create awareness. So we kind of do that with both. Our common objectives are almost mirroring each other, saying, hey, we need to be vigilant, we need to get our information, we need to investigate it, and we need to prevent these predators, again, from gaining access to any students or minors out there, and create awareness so that not only are the schools, but everyone is aware of the actions that these predators do.
Hand it off to Deb.
Okay, I'm just going to talk a minute about a case in which a teacher introduced a threat to kids. This allegation came to light after a female student, complained to the office that a teacher's boyfriend was talking bad about her. A backstory on that is the teacher had met this boyfriend. He was 21 years old online and had him move in with her. This teacher taught elementary students, but would take it upon herself to counsel middle school students, mostly girls. She would go to their basketball games and bring her boyfriend. Her boyfriend started to talk to these players and told them that he was a recruiter and a scout for a D1 university, and he would help them with their basketball scholarships. So he began to call some of the players. He talked a little bit about basketball, and then he would talk to them about their middle school drama, about her middle school boyfriend. He even called this middle school boyfriend and threatened to beat him up, saying that he knew where this little boy lived. So obviously scared this child. It was also determined that this teacher had given the school keys to her boyfriend so that he and some of his friends could play basketball at the school after hours without her there in a gym where you could not see the lights from the outside. He would have these students come up and play. Again, they thought it was okay because he was supposedly this recruiter, and it was legitimate because he was the teacher's boyfriend. So things started to come to light, and when all of the communications between this boyfriend of the teacher and these students came to light, the player had not told anyone about it because he had threatened to find her, take her away, kill her, that she did not know how easy it was for someone to make a person disappear. She better watch out. He knows a lot of people that like 15-year-old girls, and he's coming for her. He had her followed at Walmart by one of his friends and also threatened her there. When the teacher found out about it, the teacher told the student to delete all the messages because the child needed to delete the messages to protect the child. So this teacher facilitated the communications of her boyfriend with these middle school students by providing their cell phone numbers and possibly addresses of the boy. So that's kind of some of the cases that we deal with. And that's when an educator can introduce a threat by their association with others, friends, boyfriends, spouses. You don't know who these other people are when they come into the school, and especially when they're allowed access after hours.
So I want to talk a little about the behaviors and warning signs. And we kind of want to look at the behaviors of the human trafficking and our own personal cases of the inappropriate relationship with educator and students. Now we've gathered some of this evidence from prior training and just a review of our cases. And we were kind of noticing some common signs that they were gift giving, that there was exchange of pictures. They would connect through social media so that it was, in the outside world. They would gain their trust and groom them to discuss about their personal life. And then sometimes those conversations would turn towards sexual activities. They would go ahead and look for maybe the student that didn't have that self-confidence and, comment about them, that their body looks great or that they're this or they're that. So they would gain that trust. They would encourage secret relationships. There'd be that excessive touching of extra hugging or, the pat, the hair touching. And in general, they would just violate directives. So we noticed that based on our cases and prior training that you have to be aware of what you see with your students, see what's going on with these educators, just how well that they're doing these behaviors and that they could possibly be linked to a human trafficking. So just be aware and look at the warning signs when you're reviewing, information. Be very vigilant when you're looking at your school district to make sure, hey, what is going on here kind of thing. So, because our end goal is to protect these students and keep them safe. And we want to make sure that we do that in a correct way and be aware of these behaviors and warning signs.
Thanks, Tina. And I also wanted to add there, and probably should have put on the slide earlier, that if you do see signs and suspicions of abuse, as certified educators, just a reminder that the Family Code requires you to report that, because you are a professional. You can't delegate that responsibility. You have to report that directly to the Department of Family Protective Services and CPS. And of course, your school should probably have protocols to also how to handle that as well. But you want to make sure that you do the legal requirement to report that directly to CPS. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the support that we can offer to districts, and then also some of the information that we've prepared. We are prepared to offer in future presentations, and want to hear back a little bit from you all as to how we might be able to be of assistance. I see there's also some questions in the chat, and I'll try to address those as well. We have a fingerprinting and registry support unit that essentially provides technical support, but also more than that as well. We can get you to the right place, get your questions answered as well. But they are available through the help desk all week long. They answer help desk tickets within 4 business hours, and also available by phone. We have information on our website. I think there's some links placed here in the chat to our website, where you'll find a lot more detailed information about what we've provided today in terms of requirements, information about the sanctions that we are have the responsibility to add to educators who engage in misconduct. We have process documents about the IT applications, do not hire registry, our fingerprinting portal, and then we also have training videos online as well. Please do take some time to read through that if you're not familiar with the full scope of what we do. And then finally, these are the types of presentations that we have put together and hope to be able to offer and build upon as we go forward, so that we can assist you further in your efforts. Again, we have a technical training presentation. Jeannie Tomasek is, I believe, listening in today, and her team do a great job of talking to districts. You may have worked with her over the years. They provide information about how to utilize the fingerprinting ECOS applications, the registry, and the reporting portal. We have a presentation about just the legal requirements, take a lot deeper dive in what sections of the law speak to the different requirements for school districts, go a little further into some of the nuance within that information as well. And then we are just now developing and about ready to release a presentation around investigations best practices, as I spoke about a little bit earlier. We can talk about more case studies, and then just different ways that we can collaborate with school districts. But other than that, we certainly want to know how we can assist you, either today through the chat. Please let us know, or please contact us and let us know what some feedback. I'm going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time going through these. I did see one. And my connection's a little bit unstable, I'm seeing, so pardon me if I freeze up.
David, there was one question earlier. It was, what about employees that are grandfathered before fingerprinting policy took place? Is there any conversation about fingerprinting these individuals in the future?
No conversation. So the context around that is all uncertified employees who were working at a district prior to 1/1/2008 are not required to fingerprint. So that is number of years ago, but if there are employees who are still working and have not changed employment since that time, they're not required to fingerprint. Now, many districts have taken it upon themselves to go ahead and require them to print under local policy, and you're well within your right to do that. Now, all applicants for certification, SPEC certificates, and then any people renewing their certificate who haven't fingerprinted are required to fingerprint, but nothing further on the grandfathered employees. Rod, I think you might be muted there.
David, that's the only question that I've seen that I captured in the chat. If there's others, you can either post in the chat or you can unmute yourself. And if you're ready to take questions at this time, David.
Yes, please. I'll kind of move on to our final slide. So we'll offer thanks to everyone who took the time to attend today, letting us provide this information to you, and then also thanks for what you do in terms of educating students and keeping students safe. We are in the same boat in terms of that objective. And we'll certainly stay on for a period of time. And Kelly, I'm not sure if you have any other information to.
Yeah, David and team, this is excellent information. As I listen to you, I have so much to learn myself, and I can imagine other folks that are listening are in the same boat. We, as David mentioned, are here for you guys and want to get information into your hands that you need. And so I'd like us to take a moment while we're all here to be able to think about what is it that we need more understanding and more training on when it comes to educator investigations, educator misconduct, thinking about what is it that you need, what will be helpful to you. I think that there's a lot of gray areas, especially in social media and, how to handle like something that you feel like kind of that gut check, it feels off. What do you do with that? Where do you go with that information? Who do you talk to? So those are some things that were coming up for me as I was hearing David talk, but would really like to hear from you all. So please take about 30 seconds, take a minute. I know this is heavy stuff. It's really concerning and hard to hear about the inappropriateness of folks that are wearing an educator. They're in the school and they're acting in the manner that we've heard about. So take a moment and then we'll go ahead and have some time to reflect in the chat to identify questions that we have, as well as some areas where we need some more training. Because the agency too, and I like I said at the beginning, I so appreciate David reaching out because we want to make sure that we make the appropriate connections we need to be making and are able to get the information at the varying levels within the education system, right? And people that need this information, and we need to be connecting it and really thinking strategically about everything that we're doing concerning school safety, everything that we're doing around human trafficking, child abuse and neglect reporting, as well as investigations. And so any of those links that we need to be making, we want to be doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and just not talk and for y'all just take a few seconds to think. Great. And now I'd like for folks to, I see people starting to write into the chat. Please in the chat identify questions that you have from today, and no question is a bad question, and areas where you need additional training and would like more information, because we want to make sure that you get that, and we want to make sure that we make the appropriate links and connections that need to be made so that you are more equipped and empowered in this sphere, in this space, within your school and within your community.
Yeah. A question has come up in chat, David. Do you find traffickers usually enrolling their children in school or enrolling the children in school?
I think, as Kelly mentioned, we are just starting to to partner with the anti-human trafficking efforts. And so that's probably something that we would, I don't have a response to it now, but something that we can look into. Go ahead.
I can, from previous trainings that we've had and from other presenters, 50% of the time the human trafficker is a parent or is affiliated, a family member. And so, yes, you could still find traffickers that are enrolling children in school. You also have recruitment done child to child in a lot of cases, and or in other forms or fashions. So we are finding human trafficking happening under the school roof, and being a part of, just like the example you heard today that was presented as far as the investigation goes. Other questions that you have and or future topics or things you need covered in the chat. Thank you guys so much for continuing that effort.
Well, I'll also just ask one question of the group, and it's obviously open-ended, but it's this is are you ready to respond if you do get an allegation of inappropriate relationships or misconduct or abuse? Are you personally ready? Do you believe that the departments around you in the school district are ready to respond to that? And my experience is that a lot of school districts have really good policies and procedures in place, but there are also some that may need to get a refresher and a better understanding of what they need to do. So I encourage you all to revisit those, and please reach out to us if we can be assistance.
Okay, another opportunity for you guys to ask or to share questions or anything you'd like additional information on would be in our survey. So if you don't feel comfortable to put it in the chat, or thinking about it, please do take this QR code. We'd like to hear feedback on today's presentation, as well as any topics or questions as we continue to move forward and equip you with information that you need. David, Deborah, and Tina, thanks so much for being on today. Thank you for what you shared, and thank you for the important work that you do. And with that, we are going to wrap up today a little bit early. We're going to give you guys some time back. Yes, this information will be available again. We will be rendering this and then making it available on our highly mobile and at-risk student programs division. So you'll have a recording of the presentation. Would really encourage you to share this with folks within your campus, within your district that need this information, and be thinking about who those folks are. So yes, it will be available. And then as we've said, we're making this connection with David's division, and we'll be integrating this information more and wanting to make information available to you all. So stay tuned. And if you have additional ideas or feedback, please do let us know. And also, it was nice, we had more people on today than we've had in the past. And so that's a really positive thing. Thank you for new folks that joined us. We are having this webinar series every month. We've had it going all year. We've had standout presenters on all sorts of topics related to trafficking and trafficking awareness. And so there is an opportunity to go back and see the webinars that we've had. And if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Rod and Nancy at Region 14, who are leading TEA's Title IV School Safety Initiative. We are here to serve you guys. Thank you for what you do. And that concludes our presentation.